All right, step number 7. First, I'm using zipper tape. So if you are using a zipper, you will want a 16-inch zipper. If it's zipper tape, you want it to be a total of 17 inches long. Yep, I clearly did not do that right. So, wow, it doesn't even measure. Hold on. Let's cut a new piece. I may have the incorrect measurements in my pattern. No, I don't. Okay, I just didn't cut it right. Okay, so I have my zipper tape. I spread the end open slightly, and then I have my zipper pull. I look at on the left side has the slightly more amount of teeth. I don't know. That zipper teeth side is on top. So there's one tooth here, which will go over the other one. So I put that side in first, and then I take the other side and put that in, and I make sure that it's lined up just how it will be when it closes, and then slide the pull on. Really is that simple. I'm going to place this zipper right side down. Get some clips. I'm going to line it up with the top raw edge and clip it in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew this in place. If your zipper is 1 inch wide, you'll use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If your zipper tape is 1 1/4 inch wide, like mine is, a number 5 zipper is 1 1/4 inches wide, you will use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I don't actually have a 3/8 inch line on my sewing machine, and I kind of eyeball that, and I don't know if that's probably not the best, but that's how I do it. Move your zipper pull out of the way. Oh, also I'm using a narrow zipper foot, I think it is, so you'll want to use a zipper foot for this stuff. I usually sew almost everything with the same foot. So all right, so that zipper is right side down on the right side of an exterior main panel. Exterior. That word is so hard for me to say. All right, so snip your threads off. And now you want a lining main panel. Since the zipper closes to that side, this will be the front of my bag. I want the lining main panel that does not have a zipper. And I will put that right side down on top, matching up the top raw edge with the zipper sandwiched in between. Clip that in place, or pin. I guess I usually say pin. I put pin in my directions too, even though I use clips when I do it. And you may have to move the zipper out of the way when you sew. So now you'll actually flip this over and sew directly over the stitching line from before. So I wish I would have put my clips the other direction. I like the flat clear side on the back, or on the bottom. Going to move the zipper out of the way. Oops. Very important step here that I totally just should read my own pattern too before I start doing it. When you get to the end of this, you want to stop sewing half an inch before the end. And that's really important. Who knows where my seam ripper is? Alright, we're going to go ahead and use, these are the other snips that I got from Havel's, and they're really thin. They work very well for my embroidery. Of course I backstitched here too, so. And it's on fleece. So anyway, yeah, very important step. You want to stop stitching half an inch before the end when you attach the lining. So I'll go back in there and just back stitch over that where I just clipped it. These work nice for this. They have some snips I saw there that have like a little, I don't know, tooth or something, I think for this purpose, that you can get in there to like snip your stitches. Like I might use these instead of a seam ripper. This works out nice. Okay. So let's try that again. You want to mark half an inch from each end and backstitch and start and stop sewing there when you attach the lining. So the first line of stitching will go all the way to the end. That's fine. The second line of stitching, you do not want to go all the way to the end. Whoops. So I'm going to go back in here and just start where I made that line and restitch what I just seam ripped and stitch back to that line, but do not stitch to the end. Very important. Alright, again here I'm just going to re-sew what I clipped only to that line I wrote on here, drew on here, whatever. Okay, trim your threads down. Okay, now I'm going to go to my iron. I'm not going to iron this wax part, but I'm going to press both the lining and exterior wrong sides together away from the zipper, and then we'll come back and top stitch this. Okay, so again, you'll want to mark a half an inch from each end. Wow, I just stabbed myself in the hand with a pin. So I'm just going to kind of scratch it in with this pin into my wax canvas. Otherwise, use an erasable pen or something. Okay. So now I want a long stitch length I'm just going to top stitch. I'm going to start right there where I made that 1/2 inch mark. And I'm using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Stitch a few stitches. Keep this neat because it will be seen. When you back stitch there. All right. And again, when you get to the other end, you'll stop where you made that mark and back stitch. And do not stitch past that. Okay, and now we're going to repeat that process with the other exterior main panel. We will place the zipper right side down on top. This time we're going to make sure that we're matching up the ends of our main panels with the end of the new main panel, and then also line the zipper up with the top raw edge. Just match both of the sides up first. And then again, I'm sewing this together the entire length for this first stitch at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Getting really hungry. Okay, now we want the other lining main panel and do the same thing and put it, no, it will be on this side. So it's right sides together with the other lining main panel. And we're just going to match up the sides and then the top edge and pin together along the top raw edge. Let's make a mark that is 1/2 inch from each end to make sure that we start and stop sewing at that same point. Do not go past it. Alright, so now along that same stitching line, but starting at the mark you made. Move my zipper out of the way. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing and press both of these panels wrong sides together and away from the zipper. Not ironing my wax canvas, and I'll be right back. Alright, now we will top stitch this. Again, make sure that you are 1/2 inch from the end. I do not want to mark that with a black pen on the exterior of my bag. It works really nicely to scratch into the wax canvas with a pin. Alright. And again, I'm using a 4.5 inch or 4.5, I think it's millimeter stitch length. Oop, do not start at the end. Start at the line you drew. Do a few stitches and back stitch nicely. And then use a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, and then when you get to the other line, just back stitch. Trim the threads. Alright. So next we will be attaching, let's see, we just finished step number 10. Nope, step number 11. Step number 12. Look at that. We are on step number 13. So we want to take our exterior side panels, fold your D-ring down out of the way, and place this, the top of this right sides together with the short sides of the exterior main panels. And I'm going to pin those together, and I'm pinning this to only the exterior pieces, not the lining pieces, and the zipper. So I'm actually going to flip this over because I can see it better from this side. And I want to pin these lining panels back out of the way, as such. I'm not pinning it through the exterior, just the lining on itself. And the zipper will get sewn to the exterior. So just place some pins alongside there. And then we'll stitch this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And just make sure that when you get to the center of the zipper here that you don't sew through your lining main panels, or don't sew through the lining panels at all. Okay. Now you will want to press the side panel and seam allowance away from the main panels and top stitch through the side panel along the seam. Make sure the lining main panels are still folded back out of the way. Alright, so I pressed this side panel away from the main panels. The seam allowance is against the side panel. I'm going to put this back to a longer stitch length of 4.5. Alright, and here you'll want to top stitch along that seam, just below it. And just make sure that you are not sewing through those lining panels at all. Alright, and then you will repeat that for the other side. And then we're going to end up doing the same thing to the lining, but we will not sew through the zipper at that point since the zipper is sewn to the exterior. Fold your D-ring down. My side panel is right side together with the exterior of the bag. And I will pin that in place. And a 1/2 inch seam allowance, shorter stitch length. I always use, or not always I guess, but usually we'll use a stitch length of 3 for like the assembling pieces, and then a 4 or 4.5 for top stitching. I made sure that those lining pieces were folded back out of the way. I feel like my bobbin's going to run out soon. Alright, and I'll press the exterior side panel and seam allowance away from the main panels, and then top stitch along the seam. And remember to increase your stitch length. Make sure here that your lining is out of the way. Okay, and then we are going to repeat that process with the lining. Alright, I think I'm going to eat dinner real quick and then I will finish this. So here's where we're at right now. We're going to do the same with the lining when I get back. Alright, as we continue on with step number 14, you want to take your side panel pattern piece and make sure that you know which side is the top of the lining side panel. Okay, so the top is the top's a little bit longer, so I guess you'd notice also if it didn't match up properly to the main panel pieces. So what we're going to do is match the top of the side panel up to these ends here on the lining main panels. And you'll just want to clip that in place. And the only thing here is that the zipper is attached to the exterior, so there's kind of a gap in the center between the two main panels. And I'll show you that from the other side in just a second. Alright, so I like to sew it this side up, and I just pull the exterior panels and zipper out of the way. So it should look like this. And right here there's a gap. So you can sew along this length and then stop and back stitch here, and then start again here and sew along this length and stop and back stitch. Or you can just honestly sew right across that middle piece. It won't make a difference. Which I think that's what I'll do. You just want to make sure here that you're holding your exterior completely out of the way. You do not want your exterior to be in any of these seams. I just had to help it past the zipper a little bit. My foot was caught. Easier probably to do this portion with a zipper foot so that you can get nice and close to the exterior panels without sewing through them. Alright, and now you'll want to press the side panel away from the main panel and press your seam allowance toward the side panel. So I'm actually going to iron that. Alright, and now we'll just top stitch through the side panel and through that seam allowance. Using a 1/8 inch seam allowance, and just make sure that you're not sewing through any of the exterior panels as you do this. Getting caught up on my mini blinds here. Maybe I'll actually just open that. Alright, so now that end is done. And now we'll attach the other side panel. Alright, I'm going to flip it over and sew from this side, folding the exterior back. Alright, and now I'll press this side panel away from the main panels so that we can top stitch there. Alright, and then we'll top stitch through this other side panel. And then we'll move on to step 15. So just make sure that you have all of your exterior panels out of the way. And again, you're not sewing through the zipper in this part. Alright. Now if you chose to, you could top stitch just over the zipper portion through all of the panels to close that small hole right there, but it really is not a problem to just leave it. It won't affect the finished bag. So step number 15 is where we're going to pin the side panels to the lining panels. So right now we have the exterior fabric will be pulled out of the way. We're going to do the lining first and then the exterior. So you want to match the side panel and the main panel, right sides together. And first I'm going to put a couple clips at the bottom. And then I'll match up the top. And this is where it's important, those lines that you drew on, the very point of that line should be on a fold. And you will sew up to that point to stitch your seam on. Or whatever, yeah, to stitch the seam allowance. So, and that's important to make sure that both sides match. Oh, and actually we are sewing the lining using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So you'll actually be right next to that line that you drew. Alright, so we're going to sew with the main panel side facing up. And I'm going to use on the lining a 5/8 inch seam allowance, just so that the lining fits down snugly inside the bag. And it's just very important here to make sure that you do not sew through the exterior at all. So you can pin it out of the way, or just pull it back really, which is fine. And make sure you also don't sew through your zipper pocket. See here, since I'm doing a 5/8 inch seam allowance, I'm sewing 1/8 of an inch away from that seam line that I drew. And then right off of the edge of the fabric. And I'm going to repeat that for all 4 corners of the bag. Did I have that? Alright, so this time I'll be starting at the top. I think I actually would prefer to have the main panel. I guess it doesn't matter. I like to have the side panel facing up. Not the main panel. But I guess it doesn't really matter, so just whichever way works for you. And again, I'm using a 5/8 inch seam allowance here, so... Two more lining seams. Alright, actually I feel like you kind of get the point of this, so I'm not going to finish filming the lining. I'll come back and show you a couple of the exterior sides and then pause that as well so that you don't have to watch this whole part. Alright, so right now the bag looks like a complete blobby mess. All 4 of the seams are sewn on the lining panel, or the lining of the bag now. So now we'll do the exterior, which is really just done in the same way. You're just going to make sure that the lining panels are pulled back out of the way. Match up your exterior main panel, starting at the bottom, with the, I had it right, with these side panels. And then this time you'll sew directly along the line that you marked. So just make sure that you fold it right sides together, right to that V, and clip that in place. And then just kind of ease around the curve. And this is all right sides together. And I'm using a stitch length of 3 for all of this. So the exterior will actually be at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then once we sew all of these seams, we'll go back in and trim the seam allowances off down to about 1/8 of an inch. Alright, and just make sure that this part that you sew directly along that line that you marked, and that will ensure that all of the seams are even from the outside of the finished bag, and that the curves at the top match on each side. So I'll go ahead and do this other one, and then I'll do the other 2 off camera. Alright, so this side I'm starting at the top. Just make sure you find that point. You can barely see the marking I made now. It's right there. And then this is all just sewn together again with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we're actually really close to being finished now. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and do the other 2 exterior seams off camera, and then I'll be back. I'm just finishing trimming up the seam allowances. All 8 seams, 4 on the lining, 4 on the exterior, have now been sewn. And I'm just trimming about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch away from each of those 4 seams on the exterior and each of the 4 seams on the lining. Got all 4 of those, all 4 of those. Okay, so on to step number 16. Before we do that, we want to make sure that both zippers are completely unzipped, and this is very important to turn your bag right side out later. Both zippers need to be open. So my lining is unzipped. I already unzipped my exterior when I was sewing. So we are going to now take both of our bottom panels. And so I have my lining bottom panel and my exterior bottom panel. And my bottom panel pattern piece. And I'm going to mark centers on these. On the wrong side. I'll use the chalk pencil for this. So I just place the pattern piece on, lined up with one side and the top and bottom, and mark the center. And then I check. I don't know, sometimes I'm off a little bit, so I flip it over and double check to make sure it's centered. And then I'll fold the pattern piece in half, and again line it up here. And then just fold that back and mark in line with that center. And again on this side. Or you can even just scooch the pattern piece down a little bit and mark your center there. And I'll do the same on my lining. Double check that that is centered. Looks good. And then okay. So now all those 4 centers are marked. We have the centers already marked on our main and side panel pieces that are on the bag. So we are going to start with the lining first. You want your lining, everything is inside out, so right sides are in, wrong side facing out. you want to place your lining or your bottom panel right side together with a main panel. First, match up all those center marks. So I'm matching up the center mark on one of the long sides of the bottom panel with the center mark on the bottom of a lining main panel. Placing this right sides together, and I just place a few clips there. I'll flip this over and match up. Oh, look, I didn't mark my center on that one. That's great. Okay, so if you didn't mark your centers, flip that, fold it in half. Okay, so my center is right there. I'm just going to stick a clip on it now. And then put this right sides together. Clip that together. Alright, and then clip the center on the short end. And again, I'll just put a few clips, one on either side of the center. And then the other short end. Okay, and now we'll clip around each of the four corners. So as you can see, I'm pushing the main panel and side panel should be wrapped around the bottom panel. And where it looks like it's wrinkled here and that the seams don't, or the pattern pieces don't fit, they fit together properly at the seam line. So there will be a couple wrinkles on the edge of the bottom panel, but on your seam line, which is like right where the end of these clips are, it's a nice smooth straight edge. As you can see, again, there's some wrinkles, but where the seam line is, there are not. So you just want to make sure that when you're sewing that together, you aren't sewing over any wrinkles, which will create weird little pleats on the outside of your bag. One more corner. Okay, now we are going to sew this together with the bottom panel facing up, and you'll use a 5/8 inch seam allowance on your lining. Am I stuck on? And you'll see when I get to the corners, I stop and adjust and actually pull like my whole bag up. Just make sure that your exterior stays out of the way. And when you stop to adjust, make sure that your needle is in the down position. Anytime you lift your presser foot, you want your needle to be down so that the bag does not move. I'm going to go ahead and trim this seam allowance now. And we'll also trim the exterior after we sew it. Oh, which I just threw on the floor. Alright, so now we're going to repeat the same process with the exterior of the bag. This time when you sew the exterior, it has that stabilizer in the bottom panel. So when you sew it together, you'll make sure that you're sewing directly next to that stabilizer, but not through it. Alright, so I'm just matching up the centers again on the long sides of the bottom panel first. It's really easier with the stabilizer in there to see how the body of the bag and the bottom panel fit together. I'm just going around the curves on this end now. Alright, and then I'll match up the other short end center. Okay, now we're going to sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Since I'm sewing directly next to that stabilizer, I find it easier to use this zipper foot. I think this is called a right zipper foot. I don't know if it's named by which side the zipper should be on, or... change that out. A narrow foot also works well for this. I just find that I can get even closer with this zipper foot. And then this should be a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And remember, you are sewing next to but not through that stabilizer. think I'll be due for new clips soon. They're slipping. They're not holding as strong as they used to. If your panels are slipping like mine because my clips just aren't holding it that great, there is the stapler trick that people use. So you would just staple within the seam allowance all the way around the bottom of the bag to staple the bottom panel in place, and then it won't slip because it's stapled together. I personally have not ever done that, but a lot of people swear by it, so maybe I should give it a try. Alright, it's easier for me to go around these curves if I have my left hand inside of the bag. Much easier. Alright, then when you get back around to where you started sewing, you'll just back stitch to secure. Alright, now I'm going to trim this seam allowance down. If you don't want to trim the bottom of your webbing, your straps, you can skip that part and leave the excess webbing in the seam allowance just for added reinforcement, so that you know it won't pull out later. Okay, now that we've done that, we're going to turn everything right side out through the pocket. So don't worry about squishing everything. You know, we can get it all looking nice again. If you're using wax canvas like me, you can't really press that, but with my hot iron, I can kind of get some of those wrinkles out and help to shape it better. So, and really it's kind of pliable with the wax in it, that you can like crease it, so I can get my seams creased well just with my hand. So yep, just be gentle enough not to rip anything, but I did leave the holes in the pockets as big as I could to be able to more easily turn everything right side out. So the bigger. That out. Also, you may want to make sure that you didn't have any creasing or puckers or issues sewing your bottom panels in, and fix those before trimming that seam allowance. Alright, so I'm going to finish turning this right side out. I think I'm about out of memory on this video, and then I'll have to start the next part. But you'll just push everything down inside, and then we're going to close up the hole in the pocket and add the handles and make our strap, and we're done. So we're very, very close. Alright, let's get this video finished. I went ahead and pressed the raw edges of my internal zipper pocket inside about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm just going to put a few clips on here, and then we're going to stitch that closed. And I think some people maybe will like do a slip stitch or something by hand. A ladder stitch would probably be good for that, so that you don't see the sewing. I think it's in the bottom of the lining pocket, and nobody's ever going to look. And I sew mine all closed on the machine because I really don't like to hand sew. I am going to change my foot back. Maybe. You know what? I don't see my screwdriver. I'm leaving this one on. It'll work. So just sew close to the edge. Alright, so tuck my pocket down inside. Go ahead and zip that pocket closed. If you feel like your interior seems slouchy, if you kind of stuff your bag very full with like towels or whatever, just something pretty full, it kind of helps the lining to hold its shape. I feel like the way this is sewed together, where the lining and exterior are both attached to the zipper the same way, I don't feel like the lining does sag in this bag, so it seems to hold its shape pretty well for me. And you can also go ahead and iron that if you want to. So now the last step is just to attach your handles and then to make the strap. So for your handle, you will press under 1/2 inch and then again 1 inch. You can iron this if you choose to, but be careful depending on your webbing, because you don't want to melt that. And then once you have that pressed under, you'll just slide it through the hardware on your bag. And I'm really just kind of eyeballing this, which is probably not the best idea. I'm going to measure it. Okay, so first I'm folding under by a 1/2 inch, so I'm marking a 1 inch. That didn't right on there at all. Yeah, I had that one folded too much. And then 1 inch. So that would be a total of 3 inches, I believe. Okay, so first I want to fold this to the 1 inch mark, and then up to that 3 inch mark. Don't listen to me, that's wrong. That's not wrong though. It shouldn't be. Oh, because it's up 1 inch from here. So really you'll be making a mark at 1 inch and 2.5. And now I have pen on my strap. Don't use a pen. And don't listen to me. Okay. So anyway, we want to go ahead and fold that clip in place, and then repeat the process with the other end of the strap. And I really am just going to eyeball it. All right, make sure here that your strap is not twisted at all. So it should go up and over. And now you'll want to, and this is step 19, by the way. I prefer to sew from the right side of the strap. I also want black thread, not purple. That is gray. Is that gray? No, that's black. Okay, so now you will go ahead and stitch as close to the hardware as you can get. And this can be a little bit bulky. So we are going to stitch directly across the strap and then back stitch and stitch again. And just hold everything together to make sure that your layers of strap don't shift. And then we'll go ahead and sew again right up close to the fold, the top of the folded edge in the back, or on the underside. And this part is pretty thick to sew through, so I'm just trying to line up that fold with like my 1/4 inch mark so I can make sure that I sew straight. Let's hope I don't break a needle or anything. Okay, so you will go ahead and repeat that for each of the 4 strap ends. And then let's go ahead and make the shoulder strap now, which is really just the same process. You have a 36-inch length piece of webbing. If you want this to be like a crossbody strap, this is like literally only so you can put it over your shoulder. So if you want it to be a crossbody strap, you'll want to go ahead and make that a little bit longer. You could also, if you burn the edges of your webbing so that they don't fray, you could just do a single fold on the handles and the strap, which is probably a lot easier on your sewing machine. This is the same process though. Fold it under by 1/2 inch, and then again 1/2 inch. And then just sew first close to the fold. And then again, as close to the hardware as you can get. And if you choose to add rivets to this step as well, you could go ahead and add those. I think on my strap I would add it between the 2 lines of stitching. So here, and then the other one would be here. Probably in the same place on the shoulder strap as well. Alright, so once you get all of the strap sewn, your shoulder strap sewn, I'm sorry, I want to call that the handle probably. Something's wrong with my bobbin here. Then you can iron your finished bag and you're done. If you used wax canvas as I have, you don't want to iron that. You'll just go ahead and I'm going to hit it with a hot iron. Well, yeah. To get out some of the extra wrinkles, and then you can kind of crease the seams, push them out with your hands, and you can just crease those, and with the wax in there it holds shape nicely. So I think that's everything. If you have additional questions as you're making your bag that weren't answered by the video, or you don't see in the pattern, my Facebook group is called Sincerely Jen Patterns Group. You can ask any questions there. There's a lot of people to help you out. My testers are in the group, so they can help. Plus I'm in the group and I answer all questions. And also I'd love to see your finished bags if you want to share those in the group or on Instagram. I would really appreciate that. I love to see everybody's finished bags. Thanks for watching. I hope the videos helped.